Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. To be honest, I had a late night last night, so this episode feels like an early morning episode. But I sometimes think in the early mornings it is the best time to actually speak. It's as if it's not the early morning right now, but when a person wakes up, they have awakened to the nature of reality. That's the cool thing about life. So I thought about this title pretty much. Did you know insight is insight? I forgot to type it. And so I want to talk about wisdom of the ageless. And really, in order to talk about this, there is something that I should pretty much acknowledge. I guess in esoteric circles, there was this man by the name of Manly P. Hall, and he got sponsored by these hidden patrons, and he went around the world and he, in some sense, compiled the wisdom of ancient mysticism into this next level book called Wisdom of the Ages. And to be honest, until this moment, I've really never had that much of an inspiration to read this book. I don't even own this book. I remember my cousin who believed in a past life he was Gurdjieff. It's a cousin of mine was sharing it with me, But regardless of this wisdom of the ages, for me, everything has to do or starts with the sight of the human being. And if there are questions about the sight, then in some sense it's as if there is something, it's as if we need to do something essential before we start the, let's say, general journey of let's say, inquiry into the nature of intelligence, right? It's as if sight has a crucial role. Now, for this episode, if the viewers look at the desktop and look at the picture, I'm going to bring in this, my notepad. And I'm going to screen share my notepad pretty much. So hang in there, guys, until I find this. Alright, let me accept the connection on the desktop app. Yeah. Oh, man. Guys, when you talk about mysticism, sometimes you feel like a fool of your current world, and sometimes you feel like a wise man of another world, Imagine there was somebody there like, yo, man, this guy's wise, And then they talk to the person, and he's like, I am wise, but not in this dimension, bro. Like, what is this dimension? But jokes aside, let me get this in. So... why I can't share this. What is this? Okay. People are like, Mr. Within, it's Saturday. Hurry this up. Guys, something that the viewers don't know, if you actually get to know me, I think I break the record of being the, indirectly most serious and directly most silliest person on the planet. Okay, there we go. Finally. So if people look at the screen, they'll see my notepad. You know, it's too big, but what can you do? Right here. I think this is big enough, good enough. All right, here, whatever. I guess I'll make this full screen. All right, looks good enough. Okay, so if people look at the screen, now there's a notepad, and now I can explain things on paper as well. So pretty much we have the word insight, and we also have my, you know, handwriting. So people need to look at the screen actually right now. Excuse me. So we have the word insight, and so this word is made of the word in and the word sight. And the word insight is actually an unknown, I would say, mysterious access point of meaning. And guys, I usually write at an angle, so this, you know, anyways. So, in some sense, the word insight is wondering what is in our sight. Now, the interesting thing about sight is that sight implies the senses. And the word insight is very fascinating because what is in our senses, in other words, what is in our senses? And the answer is clear. Sight, here I'll draw a picture. We have a human being. This human being sees something. Let's say this human being sees another person, okay? Now, what is happening is sensory information is entering the eyes of the individual, and it is reaching a space where that space can be conscious of the senses. The word insight is wondering about what is having access to the sight. The concept I use is pretty much, I have, imagine if this was the eyes of the person, okay? Or here, I'll draw a better picture. People are going to be like, this stick figure has a huge head, but there's a reason. Right, so what is happening is that in front of your eyes, dear listener, this is part of the, I guess, system, pretty much what I'm explaining to the listeners now is with a Mr.Within approach to consciousness and perception. I'm this person who has come up with this thing I call Mr.Within's inner and outer realmism, or outer and inner realmism. And for me, I am dividing reality that what is in front of your eyes is considered the outer realm. What is in front of, inside, behind your eyes is the inner realm. This is very important because the word insight, the sight component, this refers to the, what do you call it, outer realms. And what is in the sight, what is experiencing, what is using the sight, call it free will, call it whatever, right? That's an inner realm property. So, why can't this save? So when it comes to the question, not the question, but the comment, did you know insight is insight? Pretty much this episode is focusing on how sight has meaning, how insight is the response, the conscious response to sight. And the consciousness of sight is very fascinating because, let's say now there's a tree. And so, because the human intelligence is observing it, in some sense, the observer is not equal to the observed, and the unchangeable inner witness. So the observer is not equal to the observed, and the unchangeable inner witness does not equal the observer. In mysticism, guys, pretty much this is the algorithm. The truth seeker is starting the truth seeker is starting in duality. From duality, from a universe where it's like divided, everything's divided. There's a self in the world. There is chaos and order. There is space and matter. There is light and darkness. There is individual and collective. Honestly, it's like you start inside the yin-yang circle symbol, and then you realize the yin and yang are held in the same circle. Insight is another way of discovering the source of sight. Human beings are such fascinating creatures that the nature of our human design and the nature of how memory and imagination works is that when the human being discovers a new dimension, it in some sense needs to position it in accordance to all the previous dimensions that they have thought about. Sometimes I wonder what is the difference between, let's say very conscious people and those who are living unconsciously. And the major difference is that those who live unconsciously, they are having emotional reactions which are being greater. This is for an unconscious self. So an unconscious self has emotional reactions being greater than, in some sense, intellectual responses. The biggest thing, guys, I will tell you that I have realized about who we can truly say are intelligent people on the planet is that they are patient. There's something about patience that is otherworldly. If you are truly identified by this world, you cannot be patient because everything that changes the context of meaning. But a patient person is as if it's as if the person's patient enough to see how the context changes. There's actually this Chinese story, I think, of this farmer. And one day this farmer has his horse, his prize horse, in some sense, run away. And all the people in the village come to the farmer. They're like, "Oh man, farmer, your horse ran away. You're so unlucky. What are you going to do? You unlucky farmer." And the farmer looks at the village people and gets angry and says, "How do you know I'm unlucky? Maybe I'm lucky." Right? And people are like, "What do you mean you're lucky? Your horse ran away. This farmer's crazy," and they all leave. Right? The next day, or like a few days later, the horse returns with 3 other wild horses. It's as if the horse went into nature, got some friends, came back. And all the villagers come to the farmer and they're like, "No way, farmer, your horse brought 3 other horses for you? You have 4 horses now? My God, you're the luckiest farmer alive. You're the luckiest person alive." And the farmer gets angry and says, "How do you know?" He doesn't get angry, but he says, "How do you know I am lucky? Maybe I'm unlucky." And then the story goes that the next week, right, his son is on one of those new horses and his son falls down and breaks his leg. And all the villagers come to him and say, "Oh my God, old farmer, your only son, your only son broke his leg. Now who's going to do the work of the farm, you unlucky old man?" And so the farmer again says the same response. "How do you know I'm unlucky? Maybe I'm lucky." And then the next week they come to enlist soldiers for the army, and because his son's leg is broken, they can't take his son. And all the villagers come and say, "You're lucky, man, you old man, you're lucky, your son's not gonna die in war for no reason." And so the guy says, "How do you know?" And this thing keeps going on. And it's a suggestion. The moral of the story is a suggestion. The moral of the story is a suggestion in some sense. The patience to see the context change is the liberation of those who have moved beyond the dimension, who have indirectly transcended. The beautiful thing about the concept of enlightenment is that it is something that has nothing to do with your past or future, believe it or not. Right? This notion of enlightenment, this notion of nirvana, this notion of moksha, this recognition of the Atman's place in the Parabrahman, for the conscious self, in emotional reactions are less than, I would say, conscious responses, whether you like to call it intellectual responses. And guys, if you're wondering why my handwriting is this, because I'm holding the pen from like its bottom half, you know. I'm holding this pen like a chopstick as I'm writing. And because it's Saturday, guys, feel free to go savage, you know, in the chat section, you know. Anyways, I think okay, here. I'll create a structure and then I'll stop taking notes and I'll just get into the episode. So, pretty much I would say this is how I'm, observing the design of this episode. First, there is in some sense, let's say the statement, do you know? Do you know insight is insight? The implication of this sentence could be, do you know that your wisdom is in reach? And do you also know that the consciousness that is the original space where meaning is interpreted, it appears to itself as if it is in sight. It's as if the world is a sight and we are in it. And so the question is not about what do we see, but it is about who is looking. You know, people may not realize this, but the purpose of yoga, the purpose of meditation, the purpose of all spiritual traditions on this planet in history was to, in some sense, say to the species and guard like a flickering candle, you know, on a windy night. You know, it's as if you put your hand in front of a flickering candle. All the mystics, spiritual people on the planet have been trying to keep alive this notion of, I would say, the unknown observer. The nature of what is experiencing reality is actually unknown. The nature of that which is perceiving, accessing sight, using sight, navigating through sight, it is actually unknown to the sight itself. Really, what the human intelligence is a response. Or you can say it's how an unconscious reaction has found itself capable to become a conscious response. So my personal metaphysics, like I'll tell you, spirituality nowadays, it can become something where the person gets consumed by the stories they attach to their truth. But in reality, true spirituality means a human being has reached the unknown. What that means is that there is no image to the unknown. The unknown is like, at best, if people wanted to worship the unknown, even though it's impossible, but if a person wanted to worship the unknown, it's as if you're worshiping a giant question mark the size of a cosmos. So that's about the title. Now, Wisdom of the Ages. So guys, I'm going to share with you something that there was a time, I think it was around 3-4 years ago, where I went into a sort of, believe it or not, I felt a sort of researcher of consciousness for the species. You see, it's like right now I'm not a neurologist, right? And I'm not a psychologist, but I realize that I have the same access point to the mystery of the human experience as any other scholar. Right? That means if we wanted to know what the human experience is like or how it's happening, it's as if we are being a human experiencing a cosmos. You see, it's as if every person has access to this raw experiment that is being the psychological, physiological entity. And believe it or not, a lot of schools of thought, I've looked at the academic system, and to me it has all been classified between whether materialism is in the causal position or immaterialism is in the causal position. The continental philosophers, they realized that in some sense, the immaterial, the mind could be an immaterial intelligence, right? But in some sense, the analytical philosophers were too frightened. Right? To me, the analytical philosophers, I don't want to say they were cowards, but they were like people in the back line of the army that convinced the general to stop caring for the front lines. The continental philosophers are the cavalry of the educational system. People don't realize. People think that philosophy is meaningless now. You know why? Because the world has looped. The world is in a loop. I don't want to say a hell loop, because that's the most ancient concept, idea connected to a loop, one of the most ancient ideas. But I will tell you that to me, the issue with modern civilization is that instead of the educational system shouting at the children of this world, you're in an unknown world, god damn it, explore this shit, right? Instead of the advanced civilization shouting that to the children of mankind, I shouldn't say advanced civilization, the educational system is in some sense telling people, okay, prove to me that you know that the past is the past, and then sure, go do whatever you want after the educational system. A proper educational system, global educational system, should be one that doesn't let the student graduate until they have discovered something that did not exist in history before. That means everybody graduating in the future from the educational system is either going to be an inventor, or a discoverer of some idea or something. You see, if the species does not care for new dimensions, it has accepted its demise in old dimensions. Do you see? And for me, something is bizarre. It's as if I honor my ancestors, but if I behave like them, then they will dishonor me. Right? If we behave like 6,000 years ago, what's the point of being born now? Right? It's like I understand the Bhakti yogi, I understand the love of the religious person for the faith in the inconceivable source of reality, but my dear being, it's as if man needs an instruction booklet. It's another way of saying, was God imperfect that he had to remind? And so it's as if, sometimes it's bizarre to me. They tell me to, like when I was younger in religion, it's like the idea of like, okay, believe in God, but also believe in the holy book, and they contradict each other. Because if the inconceivable God is the ultimate authoritarian archetype of perfection, how could perfection make a mistake? You see, what to Adam and Eve was their mistake, to God was, I would say poetically, just what had to be done. I don't know, if other theologians have thought this, but for me, ever since being introduced to the idea of religion, it has been to me like this puzzle, this sort of Rubik's Cube. Right, where I'm like, why? And eventually I concluded, and this might be a bit bizarre if somebody says, Mr. Within, are you religious? I'm going to explain to you how I'm religious. I'm religious in the sense that to me, all religions are time traveler activity. They're from the future. The future is inconceivable. They say the concept of God is inconceivable. The future is where everything is going. The future is the concept of destiny. You see, it's as if one thing the human species may have forgotten to consider is, what if the past was a simulation from the future? just like we have the mind-body dualism, right? It's as if we're saying, okay, is the mind projecting a body for itself, or is the body hallucinating the mind? Is the body projecting the mind? And so for me, the same thing, applies. Is it the past that is projecting the future, or is it the future that is projecting the past? The mind of the universe is the future. The body of the universe is the past. And we, as creatures on this rock in the middle of nowhere, have to have the courage to nullify, to neutralize perception and start again. There is if anybody feels like a great reset is coming, you'll laugh when you realize any moment in your life you could have reset the whole simulation. It's just that we're so identified with language, we cannot conceive of another way. Right? It's as if like the human body is an instrument and it's being played the same way as it was 6,000 years ago. But it's as if this human body, this DNA requires to be played as if you are in some sense Beethoven's rival, right? It's as if people imagine Beethoven had a rival, and like 100% he probably did, but let's say Beethoven had a rival, and the rival and they asked Beethoven, do you have more respect for those who are trying to defeat you, or those who are in some sense just honoring you from a distance? And imagine Beethoven would say the rival is trying to reach heaven. You see, the beautiful thing about greatness, if it is truly greatness, it will inspire greatness in the realm. Something about life is so remarkable, whether you like it or not, regardless of the emotional dimension of perception, the emotional filter on the meaning of the moment. Nature will reveal itself. Nature will show itself. That's the beautiful nature of this world, that it's an idea that counters death. That means death is a door. Life is an opened door. And why should the species fear doors when we made them to walk through? You see, to me, sure, there is this concept of death. Sometimes I remember once, I don't know if it was after a talk, during a Mr.Within talk, when it was, right? But I remember there came one day where I felt I was standing in front of my own grave and looking at my tombstone. And I was wondering what would be written on it. And I've thought about whether it would be written, rise mankind, rise, and advanced civilization is the future's birthright. Or I just thought that maybe, the word I would leave behind on my tombstone would be like the word advance in caps with an exclamation. There's some people who believe in spirits, and they believe that spirits protect them. I would say one spirit which I feel I have become an ally, one intelligent rhythmic force on this planet, is the spirit of advancement. It's the spirit that hasn't been spoken about. It's as if there have been unacknowledged poetically, let's say in Greek mythology, all the gods in Greek mythology weren't all the gods, like some of the gods imagined weren't written. And in every era, there has been a spirit of advancement. In Vedic thought, their perception of this is so intense because Brahman is in the archetype of the creator, Vishnu is in the archetype of the maintainer, and Shiva is in the archetype of destruction. And it's another way of saying, like, when a child is born, it's as if a Brahman has blessed the world. You know, when a human being is alive, that's like Vishnu blessing the world. You know, Vishnu's got your back. And then when life is about to exit, that is Shiva's performance. It's as if it's like what on one dimension is, you know, the incomplete behavior of man, in another dimension is the complete behavior of the divine. Now, wisdom of the ages, it goes to Manly P. Hall. You know, honestly, guys, let me share something about this. Manly P. Hall, so I'm a person who, at some point in my life, instead of listening to music throughout the day, I listen to lectures. It's as if music got sometimes it gets a bit boring, but sometimes I play like in one YouTube tab, like an ambient song set at 50% volume, and in another YouTube tab I just play like a lecture from YouTube, right? And I remember the first time I saw a Manly P. Hall video on YouTube, I saw his picture and there was this inner feeling, this is years ago, where I felt I shouldn't listen to this person. And so I avoided his talks until from somewhere indirect I heard his talk and I realized it was him. And then I got, you know, I felt that there was a very kind and compassionate soul. There was a diamond in the dirt, right? Because let me tell you guys, if somebody said, you know, to, let's say, how would I say it? Let's say if somebody asked the Bodhisattvic realm on the planet, is New Age, or let's say even let's say esoteric spirituality of like these, you know, groups in the shadows, like, is that correct or not? You know, it would be as if the answer would be that it is child's play, unless every human being accesses what I call the decency resonance. If you don't access the decency resonance, guys, this is another way of saying all your spiritual ambitions are actually your mind's masquerade, your mind's cruelty, right? People think that if they're just cruel to others, that's it. They were cruel to others and nothing happens to them. But guess what? You have now created a memory of the expression of cruelty. It doesn't matter if you did it to someone or someone did it to you. It's as if that memory lingers in the mind, and all your memories have to deal with the cruel self, right? For me, this is the idea. We realize that human beings care for life. Human beings care for life so much that they want to see its greatness. This becomes the ultimate premise of civilization. That means it doesn't matter. There is no longer good or bad people. There is just consciousness in this universal sector advancing its communication as the ability of the universal sector. You see, it's as if right now in the clouds we realize there is thousands of, let's say, extraterrestrials watching us, as if we're in some gladiator arena of like early species against time. It's as if there was a galactic universal audience. Do you know how we would behave? Do you know how the human species would behave when there is greater dimensions standing in the room of Earth? The wisdom that comes to you is not one of savage consumption, because let me tell you, any act of violence is a sort of tattooing of dualistic karma. What I'm trying to tell people is that stop anything that doesn't feel innately, naturally authentic. I am telling you, just like the body, you eat bad food, the body knows how to heal itself, right? Similarly, if the person stays in their decency resonance, their mind knows how to handle perception. You know, there was somebody by the name of Edgar Casey. I'll write his name here. At Manly P. Hall, Edgar Casey, I think they were around the same time. There was also this lady who would channel this being called Seth. I think Sith is from Star Wars, but I think there was this lady who would call it, channel this being called Seth. And, I've actually looked into channeler psychology a lot, guys. I don't talk about it because there's nothing to say. But anyways, who was Manly P. Hall? I personally think this dude was the voice of a higher dimension. Edgar Casey, this guy's way of accessing the higher dimension. Imagine every human being is an antenna. Edgar Casey's approach was very fascinating. Edgar Casey was this dude that everybody would come and sit in a room, like imagine an audience would come and sit in the room. He would go lie down on the bed, like on a bed, and he would go into this semi-sleep, semi-conscious state, and people would ask him questions and he would answer as if he is not Edgar Casey, right? You see, channeling is remarkable, but there is a misunderstanding comes with the treasures one finds. You can say the young soul, imagine the soul, we change that word for treasure revealer. Okay, the concept of the soul was like changed to treasure revealer. And so let's say instead of the traditional esoteric idea of the young soul and the old soul, there was the young treasure revealer and there was the old treasure revealer. And let me tell you the difference. Immanuel Kant has this quote I have to share right now if I find it. Immanuel Kant says, immaturity is the inability to use one's understanding without guidance from another. Do you see? So it's another way of saying when you rely on the intelligence of something outside of you, you are immature. When you rely on the intelligence of that which is within you, you're mature. Now, instead of mature, think about the old soul. The old treasure revealer has realized that the true treasure is within. And because the true treasure is within, the outer realms is in some sense just a sign pointing internally. It's as if the human being constitutes of known external dimensions and unknown internal dimensions. Behind your eyes, an unknown viewer stands. In front of your eyes, you're standing as a known biological organism on a planet. It's as if they ask the person, it's like, who are you? And the person's like, I'm the periodic table, bro. I'm a carbon-based life form, It's as if how can we ever attribute psychology to a particle? We apply psychology to a group of particles, but when it comes to like the psychology of an electron, nobody cares if the electron is happy or sad, Nobody gives a shit about what electrons are feeling, Anyways, the reason I was sharing this about Manly P. Hall, Edgar Casey, that incredible lady who channeled, said, in modern times we have someone who's alive right now, which I would say he's a sort of wonder of the psychological world. I would say this man named Bashar, The reason I'm sharing these names, guys, because it's important to acknowledge the effort of all minds that try to advance in the universal sector, because the future gives one's inner realms an ability where I would say you don't become a king, but you become the kingdom of the future generations. Like right now, believe it or not, in my inner realms, I serve a king. Now somebody, imagine, comes and says, Mr. Within, is that king God or is that your ego? Like, what king are you serving? And I would tell you, I would say, even if I don't use the archetype, what I feel I am serving as if it is royalty is the future. To me, the concept of there's the conceivable king, which is whoever wears the crown, and then there's the king, which is the awareness which the future occurs through. All right, for me, the future generations are kings, which we right now are serving everybody in life. Right, the advanced civilization is the kingdom of mankind, and the kings of the advanced civilization are always the unborn. That means till the end of time, human beings are going to be born, and they're going to be serving the future, and the kings of the future will come and go. What I mean by this is that the future will never arrive to the present. You see, that's the hilarious thing. Unless a new experience occurs, the person doesn't know an experience was new. I think is the guy's name. There's a documentary, guys, I would recommend people who are interested in observing New Age psychology to in some sense watch this documentary. I think it's called The Channeler, or it's called Channeling. Channeling is kind of like I would say it's like an art form. Just like you have like a Japanese ceramic master, you have, human beings who are interacting with inner realm entities. The mystic, the wise mystic, the old soul knows that truth, in order to be original, must have been there from the origin. But the young soul, the young treasure revealer, it is, how can I tell you, it's as if there's states of mind where you look at this world as whatever you are, and you are like, is it known? Do I know this? And then there's moments where you look at the world where you're like, do I not know this? It's as if like, and the mere acceptance of the view creates your emotions. Let me see if I could find the name of this documentary. Oh, it's called Tuning In. It's actually a really cool documentary to watch. So I want the listeners to watch this documentary called Tuning In. And you will get a sense of how many different kinds of complex relationships psychology has created within itself. So I'm going to go into a quote tunnel of Manly P. Hall and maybe Edgar Cayce, or maybe Darryl Anka or Bashar. But before I go into that quote tunnel, I want to explain something about psychology. So the viewers need to look at the screen again. So let's say we have philosophy, we have science, and then let's say we have psychology, and then we have the branches of psychology. So this is very important. Two approaches. We have structuralism, and we have functionalism. Okay. Structuralism looked at pretty much the design of the mind and try to fathom elements to it and the relationship of those elements and the implications of those elements. Functionalism was the relationship of the human being with its environment. Structuralism was in some sense the geometry of the mind. So, aside from structuralism and functionalism being two approaches, and structuralism came first and functionalism was a sort of counter-argument. But there's different perspectives that all of this divides into. Alright, this is something that's historically important to know. So, I would say we have the biological perspective. Oh, and sorry guys, I forgot to mention something. Okay, here. Never mind. It's actually okay. I'm gonna mention it now. So, imagine there's a tree. Its trunk is philosophy. Science is a branch. A branch of that branch is psychology. And now psychology, I would say, has 8 branches. And I'm gonna explain these to you. So, the biological perspective. The evolutionary perspective, which is an extension of it. We have the cognitive perspective. We have the behavioral perspective. We have the psychoanalytical. Excuse my handwriting. We have the humanistic perspective. We have the psychoanalytical perspective. Modern society is really keen on this perspective. We have the this one's really interesting, biopsycho-social perspective. And so if I explain these 8 to the viewers, the viewers will understand that in the history of the human species so far, these are the major ways we have managed to categorize in what ways the mind is moving to itself. You see, the mystery of the human intelligence is so incredible that everybody is given a chance to solve it. It doesn't matter if you're a baker, it doesn't matter if you're, a professor that was, reincarnated 1,000 lifetimes as a professor. It's like, imagine a professor in a university that remembers all his past lives, and he's like, man, I was teaching galaxies, now I'm in, looking at these ungrateful kids, bored. But anyways, these perspectives are important to explain, and they're very to the point. If I get this done, guys, if I explain these properly, it would be as if I have successfully explained human history so far. The psychological ways that we receive it. So we go to the biological perspective. We are using our knowledge of how the body is happening to, in some sense, perceive what we are. The behavioral perspective. It's as if the behavioralists were interested in observing in just behaviors they could measure. Right? A behavioralist is like, hey man, if I can't see it, get it out of here, you know. But it was in regards to behavior. So the behavioralist had the honorable task of looking at the direct information of human behavior and in some sense observing it that way. The mystics were in some sense wondering about the unknown behavior of what we call a mind, which isn't even an object. The evolutionary perspective is the remarkable insight, I would say a bit of a macrocosmic insight. People don't realize how boss, the concept of evolution was for its time. It was suddenly giving a sort of, story. How can I tell you? It's as if the story of how an animal changed is way more simpler and way more evident than the story of spontaneous, inner truths. Like, I could totally see that an evolutionary perspective is like, yo, we gotta care for the creature before we care about the ideas of the creature. Do you see? It's as if it's a tuning in on the journey of the DNA, rather than its just current display. So it's as if the use of evolutionary force in one's perspective is the evolutionary perspective. I'll go to the cognitive perspective. I would say the cognitive perspective is like the fascination of the past with the future. It would be as if, like, how are the gears of the body leading to the movement of the gears of the mind? If you're a secular person when it comes to transcendentalism, like if somebody said, can an atheist have the idea of the transcendental? And the answer is yes, because transcendence means there's more than one dimension, and what is in that one dimension can move out of that dimension. Transcendence, to let's say, blinded by magic mind. It's like, I don't know how to say it, but it's like the cognitive perspective is considering the I would say to some degree measurable ability of it's pretty much like how this instrument is calculated. You see mental processes go at work. If somebody's a mathematician, they're using mathematical mental processes. For example, the concept of arithmetic, the philosophy beyond the symbols of any language, whether it's mathematics or, let's say, I'm trying to learn Japanese, to be honest. Can you imagine if, like, in a few years I'm speaking like fluent Japanese? I think it's gonna like shock the viewers. It's like half the lecture is it's like 1/3 of the lecture is gonna be in English, then it's gonna be 1/3 in Farsi, and then it's gonna be 1/3 in Japanese. Or it's gonna be Farsi, English, and Japanese. I think that's how. I could do the ending at least, it's like, arigato. Technically, if somebody just, starts a, records a podcast and just says arigato once in it, that's technically a Japanese podcast. A podcast in the Japanese language. It's like I give lectures in Japanese, and the whole lecture is just the person saying arigato once, end of audiobook. Or end of lecture, podcast. So, guys, my attention has gone to the chat section. I'm gonna do something where I think everybody's gonna be like, look at this man's ego, but it's just something I feel I should do. So, pretty much, let me tell you what's been happening with the channel. The channel has been, for me, like a cyber life, and my attention, certain moments has been to contribute to the cyber life that I'm living. But at the same time, I don't know how to say this, but my attention, if the Mr. Within YouTube channel was a branch, and if I was an eagle, it's as if there's so much, my relationship with it is, it's a branch I visit often, but I live in the sky, I'm not bound to this branch, right? So it's kind of like I'm a bird. Imagine I'm a blue jay. I land on the branch. Oh, Mr. Within's doing a YouTube talk, right? So the YouTube channel is kind of like a branch. That's the relationship I have, I guess some part of me needed to feel like an uncaged bird, But anyways, so the idea I'm trying to say is that this YouTube channel is like my life, like a part of my life, and the membership area is, I'm reorganizing the whole thing, Like the membership area is gonna become pretty much, I've called it Mr. Within's Cyber City. I'm pretty much going to redesign in an incredible way the membership area. So, I would recommend people to consider the membership. It's just $4.99 per month, right? If that's too big of a number, I understand. But it's just the most basic YouTube model. It's YouTube recommends that. But anyways, the membership is going to become an incredible place where I share content with people, content that I just think why not? It's pretty much things that are maybe too intense for me to share public. I'll share in the members. It's kind of like a lounge, Maybe I should rename it from, Mr. Within Cyber City to, Mr. Within Cyber Lounge, And there's, of course, Discord events and all that, like special events just for members. But anyways, to continue with this talk I'm in the middle of. So, the cognitive perspective, alright. Wondering about the nature of cognition and what role it plays in our perception, let's say. Now, there is the psychoanalytical perspective. This is very interesting for me to share because we all know this. There's this saying, they say Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead. And then Sigmund Freud said, God is dad. Like, it's kind of like messed up. And so, what I'm trying to say is that the psychoanalytical perspective is wondering about the relationship of the collective unconscious, what we don't know with what we know. It's as if there's ways the human intelligence is moving. I would say psychoanalytical perspective would be in some sense like a sort of genius approach to connect the personality to the genetics, and to realize that the genetics is ultimately in an unknown context. So what I'm trying to say is like what the knowledge of the human species appears like is this giant campfire. It's like the human species has made camp, but there's so much uncharted territory. And the psychoanalytical approach was to uncover that. I would say psychoanalytical perspective is another way of saying being an explorer of the psyche, realms of the psyche. We have the socio-cultural perspective. I would say this is more inclined towards functionalism, right? So pretty much how the behavior of the psychology of an entity is based on its function and its environment. The relationship of the outer realms with the entity is the environment, and in some sense the socio-cultural perspective is the relationship of society and culture to the mind. It's as if if the psychoanalysis was trying to understand, like, let's say, the unconscious, the greater system that holds the conscious system. It's as if the socio-cultural perspective was like, how is, the culture of the human being, how's the society the human being lives in affecting how their psychology is happening. And the psychoanalytic perspective was trying to figure this out, but in regards to the nature of the mind, having a relationship of a person in a society, of the relationship of consciousness with the unconscious, with the known with the unknown. But the issue is that you cannot analyze the unknown, because the unknown is an instantaneous value. In order to have any sort of measurement, we need at least more than 1 point. We need 2 points. We need like point A and point B. Then we can draw a line from point A to point B and say that's meaning, that's memory, that's truth. But if it's just point A, there is no other point. It's like the instantaneous cannot be measured. It's like all the lines of longitude and latitude that are kind of like a geometrical spherical grid on our planet. It's at the top of the lines of both poles. It's as if it's a timeless, instantaneous point. It's as if, like, at the edge of the poles of the planet, it's as if there is no time. The instantaneous doesn't experience time. But anyways, I'll keep going. The socio-cultural perspective, one of the modern, I would say, speakers to listen to is, guys, this is how I got interested in the first lecture I heard from Terence McKenna. He has this lecture called Culture and Ideology Are Not Your Friends. Here, I'll write it. So this lecture, guys, this lecture by Terence McKenna, Culture and Ideology Are Not Your Friends. It's as if he is not only placing incredibly the actual value of current society and its implication to the individual free will, but in some sense, Terence McKenna is trying to say that it's like we have been born in a theater act. And this theater act, right now, Civilization 1.0 doesn't care about its members. Those who are in charge of current civilization, it's as if they are more inspired by their emotions rather than a sort of viewpoint where they're like, oh my god, 8 billion creatures on the planet. I'm the most powerful person on the planet. Imagine those people were the most powerful people on the planet. They thought like this. They're like, wait a minute, what if I become the powerful controller of the most advanced civilization? The idea for me is that if everything advances, past systems cannot be chained. What I'm trying to say is that if the speed of advancement increases the speed of the ability to stop advancement, advancement becomes the ultimate progress. We want to see the greatness of our species before our eyes close. If this becomes the true honor of the species, I will tell you, it would be as if a glow would happen. It's as if suddenly these beams, these geometrical beams of light were sent all over the universal sector. And let's say the greatest beams in all the cosmos saw this light, and they came and they saw it's the human species advancing in ways, unlike any before. A creature that in some sense arose from the earth, stared into the sun, and in some sense brought forth universes of language that could pull it from the darkness of its unconscious acceptance into its, in some sense, conscious freedom. To me, this is the argument of all arguments, the advanced civilization. It is the greatest object. It is the greatest physical idea ever. Do you see? It is the greatness of all our greatness. That is the greatest idea ever. You see? It is the win-win of all win-wins. An advanced civilization means that the minds on the planet have decided to, in some sense, start their genius dance. Right? It's as if the future is going to be a dance of geniuses. In the future, there's going to be so much friendship between very skillful people in the future. Why? Because the collective advancement has a hidden emotion in it. It's as if you can be in any individual story, and some part of you doesn't look at the sky and wonder what it is, but you wonder if you are that sky. You see, sometimes I wonder, am I in a world or is the world in me? And so this is where the duality of the nature of mind reveals itself. But anyways, back to what I was explaining. So I've gone over the psychoanalytical, behavioral, cognitive, evolutionary, biological perspective. I'm going to go over the humanistic perspective. And the humanistic perspective is, you can say, the first connection of freedom as a sort of birthright of the human mind. Okay? That means it's the humanistic perspective, where I would say the names are Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. These two people seem to have been involved, but it's the first school of thought in psychology where it's an attempt at a romanticization, I don't know how to say it, romanticization, I think. It's the first romance with the idea of the human being primary, being the most important, right? It's like, imagine in the future, aliens, let's say like cool, liberated, similar to us aliens, they land on the planet, okay? And then they're so diplomatic and such kind aliens that eventually, like, we all, how do you say it? Like, we all accept them, and in some sense passports will have like planet, universal sector, galaxy. It's like which galaxy were you born from, like it's going to be written in the future passports, you know. But what I'm trying to say is that imagine, you know, your daughter goes to school for the first time. Imagine in this hypothetical situation, I don't have kids, but I'm saying imagine like in the future some person's daughter goes to school for the first time, comes back, and when it comes back the father's like, how was school? And the daughter's like, I made a friend today, you know. And then the father's like, oh, that's cute, who's your you know, the friend, you know, all of this. And then the child says, I made a friend with an alien child who also was attending, let's say, elementary school. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's as if the future, then the parent has to be like, do I want my child to be, you know, becoming friends with an alien? Do you know? And so eventually, like I'm telling you, we cannot control the wilderness of life that moves life, really. Right? That's the beautiful thing about nature. A person can have any opinion, and nature's gonna be like, hey man, I'm just doing my thing. You know, the world moves in ways that whether we expect things from it or don't expect things from us, it's a revelation of its own. It's as if the cosmos is a film that we are not directing, but we are an actor in, and the actor is the director of their own being. You know. You know, for anybody who let's say is an actor or actress hearing me right now, I will tell you I discovered, you know, as someone with a background in film, you know, with an interest in film, I would tell you that for me, the poet Rumi 700 years ago has this quote where he says, wherever you are, be the soul of that moment. And the true essence of, let's say, you know, a director is trying to find a great actor, and so it's as if the actor's job is to be soul of the stillness of that scene. You see, the beautiful thing about life is that our effort is a force of expression, and so the human being can control this, but not control this with emotions. Emotions, those who control their decisions with emotions, it's like there's a downside to it. The downside of it is that the instantaneous reaction denies you the privilege of oversight. But anyways, guys, there is actually something else I gotta explain. I think I'm stalling here a bit. Let me see. There's the biopsychosocial perspective. And in some sense, you can say it's a sort of compilation effort where the biopsychosocial is wondering about all the dimensions at the same time. What is the biological implication, the psychological implication, the sociocultural factors influencing behavior, right? It's as if the biopsychosocial perspective is like the most insane, the most insane out of all, let's say, psychological perspectives, because it is considering all factors. It's saying there is a body of a creature, we can't ignore that, the knowledge we have of that. There is a mind of a creature, which is its psychology, we can't ignore that. And then there's the psychology functioning in the environment, in the abstract environment, where we treat it as, how can I tell you, it's like the subjective position of civilization, right? So I would say the psychosocial perspective is like if all these perspectives had a lineage in regards to the time they came into being in history, the biopsychosocial perspective is the successor perspective. Do you know? It's the succeeding perspective. It's as if the fearless grandchild of a lineage who dared to become, in some sense, you know, the conqueror, you know, of the fear of the world. You know? the fear to understand ourselves is one of the biggest, strangest fears, you know. There's moments where I've thought, am I a coward or am I brave? You know, and then I've thought about it, you know, and I'm like, okay, I'm brave enough to wonder about it, right? And then I think about the concept of what is true courage in an unknown world, and the answer is very simple: to be able to be enlightened enough to be able to say, okay, the unknown is unknown, and you care for the unknown mysteries of intelligence in the universe as if it's a newborn child, as if it's the extension of the past into the future. I don't know how to tell you. For me, it's like revelation was the future contacting the past. What else can it be? It's as if we are limited to the human design. It's as if, you know, it's like, why wasn't there revelation before language? Right? Maybe there was some kind of revelation, but it wasn't able to be passed on, you know. Like the mysteries of the mind surpass everything. It's remarkable. In religious books, it's God created the universe, and there's this thing where God gets created. In the Islamic sense, they call it Agel, right? Which is another way of saying it's like the creation of God is bestowed with an intelligence to know God, right? And it's as if in religious context, you ask people about the soul is the secret of God. And if the soul is the secret of God, that means the secret of God is known by God. You know? Poetically, those who know their soul become the secret that God knows. They realize how God is knowing them as a secret. You know? If the soul is a secret. You know, I would say the purpose now for the biopsychosocial perspective is to wonder, first conclude itself, render itself as mighty. That means if 8 billion creatures on this planet decide to build an advanced civilization, from the beginning you should consider yourself the most advanced. It doesn't matter who you have been. It's as if you choose, the moment you choose to live for life. Do you know, it's as if when you care for the advanced civilization, you are rendered advanced. It's as if you have become allies with the future, and the future will guard those in the present who live for it. Because if it can't, it ceases to exist. It's as if the future, due to its own non-existence, due to its reaction to its own non-existence, will not let the past fail. You know, it's as if, like, imagine the human species messes up, and like there's an extraterrestrial invasion, and we're like, where did we go wrong? And in that moment where it's like the great war's gonna happen, imagine an army of time travelers arrive. I call this the immortal destiny. It's like the most beautiful work of fiction my mind has ever generated. In the future, if immortality comes, excuse me. Imagine in the future, immortal technology renders human beings as immortals, and we have 2 classifications of immortal beings: those who are bound in time and those who are beyond time. Immortality that is timeless is another way of saying eternity. And the immortal in time is another way of saying infinity. So if the species leads to some sort of immortal destiny, it in some sense has to choose. Time becomes its teacher. Infinity becomes the teachings of the outer realms, like infinity becomes the greatest idea, and the teachings of the inner realms, the greatest idea, becomes eternity. That means you are an internally eternal and externally infinite being, actually. But this what I'm saying is for the future, not now. I'm trying to say that this is the scope of the human being. We've looked at the biology. We've looked at the history of the biology. We've looked at the behavior of the biology. We have looked at how the psychology cognites and then the biology moves. We have looked at the psychoanalytical, in some sense, the context of the concept of the analyzer. You know, we have looked at it from the humanistic perspective, as if we realize the beauty in the natural continuity, natural, incredible, and efficient continuity of the human species. This idea is not something that angels will bring, but rather, it's as if rather than before it's like, okay, sure, let's say somebody believes they're going to go to heaven in an afterlife, or it's as if, okay, great, you're going to go to heaven in the afterlife, so while you're on earth, it's as if, let us try to build paradise on earth. That means it's as if all religions are asked, it's like, let's say all religious leaders on the planet, they are requested that in some sense, the let's say holy books be in some sense not shared, and in some sense, how do I say it? It's as if the heavenly ideas come to the stage, right? So every religion, like if all religious leaders were in a room and there was a philosopher shouting on stage, it's as if the effort of the secular society, which I think I am kind of a banner man of the ethos of the advanced civilization. If a person's mind has had the capability to imagine all their ancestors standing behind them, and now imagine the person's mind has a capability to see all their descendants in front of them, in the future. It's as if the mind fathomed all the ancestors of the past, and now your mind's fathoming the future generations. And imagine the future generations were watching you, whoever you are. Imagine the greatness in the future is watching us now. We are being watched by the greatness of the universal sector. It's as if, how would you behave when greatness is in the room? You see, it's as if your greatest self enters the space. Within every person, you can say, what was that ancient saying? Like, not ancient, but Cherokee saying, where they're saying, like, there's two wolves inside of you. There's a good wolf and a bad wolf, a good wolf and an evil wolf. And so when these wolves are always fighting, and the one wins which you feed, the one you feed wins more, defines you, right? So it's another way of saying there is the potential of a chaotic self and ordered self within every human being. And if the person feeds the chaotic self, they are choosing an anarchist approach to freedom, where the self is acting like a god to a soul, and so destroys itself before the reality of truth can reach it. You see, the thing is honestly, we need to have an ordered approach to civilization, but we need to have an ordered approach that is so ordered it has found an order to chaos, right? imagine there was some like sci-fi genius in a post-apocalyptic zombie storyline, and so this genius, imagine inventor, was like, all right guys, I know how we can stop the zombies from ever reaching us. And imagine this genius inventor creates this gigantic treadmill, right? And so the zombies are kind of like, they chase bait, and they come to the point where all the zombies are running on a treadmill that never stops. Do you know? You know, a treadmill that never stops. In some sense, the zombies are never moving from their location. Do you know they can't outrun it? You know, this only works in a brainless zombie post-apocalyptic scenario. You know? If the zombies are intelligent, then that's just too messed up of a world to have hope. You know, there was the sci-fi writer. They asked them, you know, what received an award, and you know, I think this story was from Neil deGrasse Tyson. But anyways, evidently there was this sci-fi writer who would write about messed up worlds, messed up science fiction universes, right? And people would be like, why is this dude writing such messed up content, right? Do you know? And the person was like, somebody went up to the guy and he's like, why are you taking people's attention to these messed up worlds? And the person says, I am showing this messed up world so people don't have to go there, right? The guy was actually a genius. He had managed to turn chaos into the art we can learn from pre-experience. To continue. I mean, the first thing is nothing can be really said about the unknown, and everything I say will be rendered as poetry whether I like it or not. You know, because that's the nature of the unknown. It's as if when you reach it, you are actually being the edge of knowledge. The unknown is a way to free the psychology of an animal into its ability to be a universal organism. Behind our eyes, the mind is receiving everything and then choosing to be a part of it. Technically, the brain is experiencing being the world as much as it's experiencing being the body in the world. There's two simultaneous like dimensions of experience going on. Now, I've explained the psychological, the various perspectives we find in psychology. I'm trying to give a sense to the viewers that wherever you are, you can just observe dimensions, and what dimensions are classification systems. So people have different relationships for the inner realms. Me personally, a lot of my spirituality is related to geometry. A lot of my inner realms has a geometrical purity that I can't attach any story or character. However, for example, for Napoleon Bonaparte, this French emperor, like he was known to have like a next level memory and imagination. And so pretty much the way Napoleon's imagination worked was that he envisioned this drawer he had, and he imagined everything about all the things happening in the battlefield, all the things happening in society, culture, all the things happening with the aristocracy and all of that, right? It's as if Napoleon was managing the whole thing through the metaphor of a drawer, and every drawer held everything he had attributed to like that event, right? And Napoleon had an ability to instantly sleep. He was one of those human beings that could any moment he wanted to just instantly sleep, as if the computers you just go and press shut down and the computer shuts down instantly. It's like that's how he could sleep. And he could, like, he had a next level precision. It's like you can't become emperor unless there's like something special about that. You know what it is? Napoleon was a savant. Napoleon was a savant, you know, with the ego of like, you know, trying to be a world ruler. But anyways, Napoleon's inner realms, he had the relationship of like a cabinet and drawer system, right? Anything he wanted to remember, he'd just pull open. For me, when I say geometry, guys, it's as if I don't know why, but I was drawn to so much mysticism that I began to actually listen to like, okay, what are these mystics saying, right? And I came to this very unique conclusion that they are saying that truth is so simple that it cannot have a story to it. And so what that means is truth is like the truth of language is silence. The truth of movement is stillness. Death is stillness. Life is movement. Do you see? These are the biological frame, these biopsychosocial frameworks we live through. Every human being, it's as if a person cannot say they love someone unless you love their mind. And what their mind is an unknown potential to, in some sense, it's as if the lifetime can become the lion's roar, or the lifetime can become, in some sense, you know, the sheep wondering why it's staring at the ground, you know. To me, when I say an advanced civilization, I am saying how many people in 2022 are brave enough to be like, okay, the whole system's unknown. Maybe if we reset the structure, the geometry, the design of the story human beings are telling themselves, a new code of an honor to lead towards greatness can arise. The era of collectivism, but in psychology. You can even create two more perspectives. You can create the individually conscious perspective, and you can create the collectively conscious perspective. The collective conscious perspective, I'd say that's like technology from 500 years in the future, right? Like right now, people are still experiencing one biological body and one, let's say, psychological source of mind. Okay, that people feel they have one mind and their body. Because they're one body, they have one mind. Okay, everybody has a mind. Like right now, we're living in that phase in human history, right? The collective relationship is actually in the distance. You know, right now we're like a boat and more a ship on the middle of the ocean, you know, rather than a ship close to the shore. right? And the future generations, they're going to be close to the shore, which is another saying that the context of truth will be experientially activated, that we're not active now, right? So a collective conscious framework and an individual conscious framework means we're wondering about how the beginning domino, which is pushed by the free will, is the consideration I am self in world, right? And or it's either I am world in self. So let's say a young child, the parents abuse that young child, and that young child ends up being a human being in the world wondering what to do. The issue, let's say in that situation of domestic violence, is that dimensions of savageness and chaotichood is displayed, is in some sense thrown at like the young child, right? So if it's like a child too young to, it's similar to this. It's like somebody giving you something too heavy that you can't carry. So the young child's mind doesn't know how to interpret chaos yet, right? So it's like, imagine that age where the child, they say up to age 14, I think, when the child is like, if you're a parent, like you should be considerate of this, right? That the child's psychology and selfhood is developing at a young age. If the child feels unfree at a young age, it's going to be later on in life, its earliest memories are going to be, its roots are going to be in a sense of absence of freedom, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so in that, there's, if the child is not allowed to naturally become itself, it's going to identify with an event of the world. So it's going to be a world selfism rather than a self-worldism. We know one thing, that the most advanced state would be playful, and the most playful state would be the most free state, and the most free state has to be the most peaceful state, because the moment we're violent, we box ourselves from the true nature of the realm. You know, people may say, Mr. Within, I can't stop being angry, I can't stop being cruel, I can't stop being violent, I can't stop being savage in a world that's inefficient, right? And I will tell you, it's not that you should think you're savage, cruel, or this. It's that you should just consider that what is the better option for the future generations. The more violence we have, the more it's as if when a human being dies, it's as if a timeline is vanishing from the earth. Do you know, a genetical advancement? It's as if death is such a remarkable thing, because it is the journey of one parallel universe of DNA which finishes its cycle, and another parallel universe of DNA arises as the next generations. You see, if humanity doesn't love its creation, it has forgotten its own children in the void. It's as if the parent's like, I've lost my child, and the person was like, where? And the parent was a philosopher and said, I've lost my child in the void. You know, in the void where all conceptual thoughts stand, where meaning is in some sense just a flag we planted in the void. Is ignorance evil? At what state does the psychology of the human being enter a dehumanized intelligent awareness, and at what point does it continue a humanized awareness? Could we say laziness to do the right thing is evil? An evolutionary animal that has become a character in a story, that is now wondering about the storyteller, behind its eyes and in front of its eyes in a world which potentially can be infinite. The mystery of the edge of the world stands. Everybody who's, a capable philosopher or inquirer should in some sense look into this. To me, everybody should have a notebook, and this notebook is, in some sense, another way of saying it's the notebook of their true thoughts. It's a true thought notebook. You know what? I'm gonna create a books, like I'm gonna sell notebooks, guys. I think that's a good market. It's like, imagine in the future they're like notebook trillionaire and podcaster. To me, writing is actually where divinity comes from. Writing is divine. It is what from the inner realm steps out into the outer realms. It is how the soul imprints itself on the outer realms. That's what behavior eventually can be concluded as. It's like an unknown force animated in an organism, which is a very complex constitution of the periodic table and cellular structure. Right? It's as if we're being like this, like next level biological animal that is like, in some sense, how do I say it? It's as if we're wearing clothing. Right? We are using names and we have personalities. We consider time and space, and we've created history and technologies and all this. But at the same time, we're just like an organic event. We're like if the organism is an event of nature. It's as if the person's like, wait a minute, am I being a part of the world right now? Am I technically, like when a human being, let's say a human being goes to Mars, that's not just a human being putting its foot on Mars, it's also the Earth contacting Mars for the first time. So ultimately, guys, what is inside leads us to the unknown experiencer. As the Upanishads say, the seer of the seen is unseen. Honestly, freedom is the most important teaching that the parents can teach the future generations. The freedom to wonder about freedom, the freedom to strategize about freedom, and the freedom to actualize it. You see, enlightenment is a solo mission, but an advanced civilization is a collective mission. And the greatest idea is how do we build something that would just in some sense be as if a gift to the future generations. I would say sometimes I guess I can think of it this way, that Mr. Within's gift is the advanced civilization to the future generations. That means it's as if this whole podcast of mine, like an underlying mythos of it, could be as if I am trying to give a gift to the future generations, which may be born in cyberspace. You see, my biggest hope is that in some digital universe these talks continue. Why? Because I would like to see how far an echo of the living can go in cyberspace. Right now I guess this is, to me, it's more of an inner cyber relationship. That means I'm like, it's not instantaneous. It's as if a person conveys their communication. I don't know how to say it. But in the future, having a cyber life would mean a multi-locality for the ego. That's what it would mean. In the future, there could be one biological body, like one collective mind, which is like 8 billion minds, and then you can choose to have as many android bodies you want. It's as if you'd be chilling at home watching TV, and one android body is gone to the store to get groceries, one android body is gone to, I don't know, like, fix your hover car or something, and so what I'm trying to say is that you're sitting in one moment, but behind your eyes you have to access to multiple screens, and the contentment of the ability to see more than 3 screens, that's when your inner realm suddenly learn to speed up, right? Like when your inner realm speed up, there is no, the pilot becomes the plane of existence. I don't know how to tell you. It's like the pilot that's piloting an airplane in the sky, strangely, it's like you either feel you're in the sky or you feel you're the sky in which the plane is moving through. It's as if I hope one day I can pilot an airplane. Imagine, like, a lot of members joined, this YouTube channel, and I was like, all right, guys, all the YouTube contributions are gonna go to me learning to become a pilot. And then imagine in the future I become a pilot and all the YouTube members, get a free fly around the world, The eyes of mankind, the journey of the soul, the acceptance of the body, the infinitude of the mind, and the presence of the unchangeable witness. That is the great teacher of knowledge. We should not fear our eyes, because little do we know that what life is when worlds animate into other worlds. This talk is as much, like if I give a talk in the future and let's say there's a standing ovation, I'd be like, guys, thank you. You're actually clapping also for all my neurons and all my, cells in my body. It's a round of applause for like the periodic table and, the biology, it's as if like neurons are clapping for neurons, Anyways, guys, this episode has gone long enough. I was gonna read something about Manly P. Hall, but I think I'll keep that for another episode. Here, I'll read one quote. But there is more wisdom to him. I mean, I'm not a good speaker on this. To me, I am more like I have been drawn to yoga and the mysticism, just of direct experience with truth rather than ideological, artificial behaviorism with truth. You know, like who has the time to like act in front of the gods? You know? Or poetically, I should say, who has time to conceivably, ignore the inconceivable source of reality? You see, all that in the heart of the human being, there's the sort of a dance of an explorer and spiraling into its own mystery. Let's see some of these quotes. Manly P. Hall says to repress rebellion is to maintain the status quo, a condition which binds the mortal creature in a state of intellectual or physical slavery. But it is impossible to chain man merely by slaving his body. The mind also must be held, and to accomplish this, fear is the accepted weapon. The common man must fear life, fear death, fear God, fear the devil, and fear most the overlords, the keepers of his destiny. Okay, this guy's tripping. Like okay. See, okay, forget the thing of fear, death, God, devil, all this. Just forget that for a second. The idea is that the original fear of the psychology of the species is the fear of the silence and stillness, which leads to unknown possibility of circumstance. We fear emptiness. It's like such a weird scenario where, like, okay, it's as if imagine 8 billion souls arrived at the party, 8 billion creatures arrived at the party of the cosmos, and there's like, where is everybody? And it's just empty space with celestial, with objects which are as mysterious as our own eyes. So really what it is it's the fear of the emptiness and fear of the unknown if you're a psychological entity, right? So to me, the fear of the unknown is like people are shocked. Where am I? What is this world? A rock hovering in the middle of nowhere? What is this? And so in that shock, it's like they're saying, okay, you can control people. It's like, it's so stupid. To control, you see, something they don't say to people who desire power is that you become a slave to what you control as much as you enslave something that you control. You see, it's as if you attach the karma of something else rather than trying to find the original earth within your eyes. It's as if your outer realms are convinced by fantasies. You see, that's the challenge of man. The issue with chaos and order is that the human being did not realize it. Of course, it's one creature moving in a world, but at the same time, there is the inner realm and the outer realm. There is the inner life and the outer life. And we have ignored the inner life for too long, right? The advanced communicators are like lions that are like, what is this, wolf's clothing on my back? Like, to be free before freedom can be taken away. To realize the world was free before the self could do anything in it. Freedom is the ultimate state of exploration. Any ideological system that does not prioritize freedom is a fool, right? Religion has prioritized freedom, as in some sense, the ultimate connection of the creator with creation. It's like they asked them, a holy man, oh, how are you a holy man? And the holy man said, sometimes I look at life and I notice what's moving it is God, right? And the person who asked the question was like, no way, man. Wait a second. I didn't think you'd be that serious. what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to animate here, is that the unknown is startling, but what can you do? It's like, imagine you've been embarrassed, and what can you do afterwards? You're just, it's as if like when you, honestly, what the brain is a world generator, and so the responsibility to generate a world where you have already succeeded in, it is a choice. Advancement is a choice. It is a choice to trust the inner realms and to trust the outer realms, to trust their synchronization, and to realize that in some sense it's as if, imagine, like, let's say from the Abrahamic narrative, religious narrative, life is a test, okay? And so imagine the human species, when it built an advanced civilization, it not only aced the test, but responded to the question in such a way that in some sense, dare I say, God deserved its own creation. It is the nature of life force. It projects us into case studies or transcendental narratives. We have to care for human beings, and what consciousness means is the freedom to be a human being. If this is prioritized, then we completely shift our attitude. It's as if the laws of civilization update, and people were like, no way, I didn't know, the law system could be this incredible. But because the laws don't update, because the future generations behave different than the past, because the nature of man, succumbs to greed, or in some sense, surpasses the soul or the transcendental. Let me tell you, the greatest enlightenment is another way of saying everything was enlightened from the beginning, so there is no greater enlightenment conceptually. It's how being is being before the human does anything. See, that is mysticism, true mysticism, life's. Let me see if there's a better quote from Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall says, "We are the gods of the atoms that make up ourselves, but we are also the atoms of the gods that make up the universe." Okay, this is a good quote. A scientist is probably tearing up right now. Manly P. Hall says, "Each person must discover his own philosophy of life, and it is not fair or right to impose our codes upon others. It is also our responsibility, however, to share one with another such experiences as may have common value." There's one more quote I'm going to read. Manly P. Hall says, "There exists in the world today, and has existed for thousands of years, a body of enlightened humans united in what might be termed an order of the quest. It is composed of those whose intellectual and spiritual perceptions have revealed to them that civilization has a secret destiny. The outcome of this secret destiny is a world order ruled by a king with supernatural powers, the Antichrist." Okay, no, that's... That, you know what it is? That's like somebody saying something truthfully halfway, and then at the end changing it. So anyways, but this king was descended of a divine race, that is, he belonged to the order of the illumined. For those who come to a state of wisdom, then belong to a family of heroes, perfected human beings. Yeah, you know what it is? Manly P. Hall is translating this ancient pattern you find developing from the earliest religion of Zoroastrianism, which birthed duality culturally, and then to, in some sense, at least known to history, and then you have, in some sense, like the narratives that come after. You see, human beings cannot contact the past because the past is past. Let me tell you, if there was such a thing as, let's say, true illuminated heroic spirit realm, if there was such a thing, I would say the intent of that realm would be in some sense to allow every soul to be the hero of their own journey. And what this means is that you stop the theatrics, the childish antics of like, okay, we're gonna act like this to bring this and bring that. It's like, that's child's play. Children plays with toys, and I would say in certain esoteric traditions, they play with behaviors, right? But in reality, nature's true nature has a spontaneity about it. And there's something, again, I'll point to this, called the decency resonance. This decency resonance is how nature has provided every human being an access point to how they are actually being before they do anything. The great secret is in some sense that we are divinity in the womb of the Lord. Imagine a human being goes to heaven, and in heaven they get an audience with God, and the human being asks the question and says to God, I understand everything you did was right, but I have a question. Why did you not populate the other planets in the solar system? Why was humanity so alone? And imagine God looks at the human being in heaven, God's voice, and says, sorry man, I was going through something, A benevolent God is another way of saying an inconceivable way where efficiency lives on. It's as if we have to advance. Anybody who chooses to be an advanced communicator for an advanced civilization in 2022, you have to become the kindest being That's the first, in some sense, a sort of condition, necessary precondition, right? That before anybody goes towards anything spiritual, metaphysical, supernatural, transcendental, you have to find your most simplest and honest self, because if you don't, you won't trust how your mind happens. That means if a person can't trust their mind, they can't trust its content. Oh my God. Guys, I just found water in the desert of, human anguish. Anyways, the wisdom of the ageless means beyond any story or any character. Freedom is an unconditional state of being. The freedom of the mind is instantaneous. The freedom of the body is strategic. If I was a teacher of a school, the first thing I would command all the students is that the behavior inside the school has to be behavior of the most advanced possibility of their own life. Do you see? Imagine a species where nobody was sad or happy because they had realized advancement meant you're experiencing that and more. Do you know? In the future, it's not that the emotional classification system is going to change. I'm just saying that in the future, there's going to be a dimension of honor, which is a collective honor, which is absent now. I feel it in my inner realms. I talk about it, but it's absent. The world story hasn't cared for itself enough to update. And so this leads us to, as the members of an inefficient civilization, we are literally have a choice to be like, okay, feed the inefficiency, feed that wolf, or feed efficiency, feed that wolf, right? And so efficiency is the lion, inefficiency is the sheep. The sheep doesn't care about its destiny. The lion cares about its destiny. The lion confronts, roars when its destiny is being influenced, right? The sheep, in some sense, just has nothing it can do. We have to get the species from its powerless past belief into the power of its future belief. That means it's as if every person listening to me right now theoretically, there is the greatest version of you on this planet is a possibility that can activate theoretically, right? Just the fact that, just like, imagine somebody's like sculpting a statue, and there's like this genius sculptor who comes and says you can design it differently, right? Or imagine there's an artist drawing a painting, and some genius artist comes and says you can draw this differently, right? Just like how in any moment a person can fathom there's a better way of doing whatever they're doing, similarly you implement this algorithm to in some sense yourself. And it's another way of saying, in any moment where you have to make a decision between chaos and order, your greater self is a possibility. That means it's as if when the person's like, I don't know what to do, that's starting from the person being like, okay, I don't know what to do with how the past has prepared me to look at the present, going into the future. But in reality, what I'm trying to say is that every person has to become an ally of how their mind is imagination. This is one of the most hilarious statements I think anyone can say, but the mind has a mind of its own. Imagination has a mind of its own. That mind is a sort of test to see how much the person can be simple, still, and preferenceless when they are actually experiencing how they are being consciousness. From the simple, there's no dimensions of complexity that can arise, so simplicity is an ultimate access point to endless complex designs. And complexity has no choice. It's either more layers are being added, or the layers are being subtracted to a point where it's just one layer, right? Simplicity is so I could have a view on life is great. That's my belief. Right? Imagine that could be the simplistic approach, but I could be that life in some sense can be great if we do this and that, and the species makes the right chess moves in its battle between time and the void, changing everything. The Mahabharata is ascribed to Rishi Vyasa, and it's a very important book to read. And I'll tell you one thing that's going to inspire you to read it, is that the narrator in the book is time. This genius writer made time the narrator of everything that was happening in the world of that literary work. Wonder about how insight is how the brain is knowing itself in accordance to the information it receives. There is no such thing as stupid and smart people, because really we're just antennas picking up information. You give someone the proper information, oh my god, what a smart guy. You give someone the improper information, you're like, okay, this person's still dwelling in the unconscious. The might of consciousness is the advanced civilization. It's as if, what does an advanced civilization deserve? The most advanced beings to build it. So in some sense, we have to find a way to get human beings into the most advanced perspective, which is the acceptance of the greatness of the future that is deserved for them. It's as if what we deserve is the greatest thing the future generations can do. That is enough of a spirit to help us build it, right? That means, imagine all the children in the educational system around the world. There came that day, where it's as if the global empire of humanity, the king is only the future. There is no crown for anybody to wear in the advanced civilization. Every person is a king of their own, and a king and queen of their own inner realms. And in the outer realms, the kingdom of mankind is the continuity of a species on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Do you know how hard that problem is to solve? Every child on this planet has to be thinking about this problem. It's as if, it's as if, like, hilariously, there was a teacher who taught in a way where his students were like, when this teacher gave a lecture, it was as if he would release lions in the auditorium, Imagine you're taking notes in a lecture, university lecture, and you suddenly look at the door, look at the time, and you see there's a lion standing under the clock, and you're like, okay, you continue listening to the lecture. And you realize, like, Warner Bros. Sponsored the lecture. But anyways, guys, I guess I'll end off the episode with saying wonder about the nature of perception. Wonder about not what is being looked at, but what is looking. Who is the one seeing sight to know that it is there to be a self. And I'm gonna read a quote from Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. He says, "It is always the false that makes you suffer. The false desires and fears, the false values and ideas, the false relationships between people. Abandon the false and you're free of pain. Truth makes happy, truth liberates." Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says the desire for truth is the highest of all desires, yet it is still a desire. All desires must be given up for the real to be. When all search ceases, it is the supreme state. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, in the mirror of your mind, all kinds of pictures appear and disappear. Knowing that they are entirely your own creations, watch them silently come and go. Be alert but not perturbed. This attitude of silent observation is the very foundation of yoga. You see the picture, but you're not the picture. It's another way of saying freedom is experiencing the illusion. So the moment the illusion stops, freedom is the only thing left. It's not that we need to try to be enlightened. It's like we have to try to see how we are not enlightened already. Then we'll realize that nature has a presence that is mightier than how belief systems can satisfy an egoic program. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, I am the self, the witness of consciousness and pure awareness. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, be empty of all mental content, of all imagination and effort, and the very absence of obstacles will cause reality to rush in. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, abandon false ideas, that is all. There is no need of true ideas, there aren't any. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, don't rely on your mind for liberation. It is the mind that brought you into bondage. Go beyond it altogether. That means go beyond how you're being, a subject is moving an object. Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, I am the self, the witness of consciousness, pure awareness. I am not an object in consciousness, but its source, its witness, pure, shapeless awareness. You are and I am, but only as points in consciousness. We are nothing apart from consciousness. The source of consciousness cannot be an object in consciousness. To know the source is to be the source. An advanced civilization is when a species realizes that whatever it has believed, which it has thought it is its birthright, the birthright of your greatest self, is how legends remember their eternity. We must not care just for the body of mankind, the physical position of mankind. We should care for the inner realms of mankind and how the greatest inventions journeyed from there. It's as if there's forces in the universe, let's say electromagnetic, gravitational, strong nuclear, weak nuclear, right? So there's forces in nature which are in some sense preserving nature and how behavior is even a possibility, right? And so in the outer realms, it's like forces are controlling destiny, the forces of the universe behind our eyes, because we are the space where the universe appears to. I guess what I'm saying is that if the eyes are the windows to the soul, what if we look through the windows? What if we look through our own eyes and realize that it's a space of present awareness? It's like we're a candle and the candle flame has a glow, and suddenly the candle flame has become conscious that it has a glow. So it's wondering, am I the flickering flame or am I the glow of the flickering flame? The mind is appearing as the glow of the flickering flame. And in that glow there is the generation of shadows, and as in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that this world we're experiencing, the outer realms, is a simulation, it is a shadow of the true world. It's as if we're living, Earth is like, at least in Patanjali's view, at the time, it was like a shadow realm, because there was nothing going on there. It's just that the word advancement has entered, culture as a sort of guardian angel of the future. A guardian of the future. I mean, like, the best argument for the advanced civilization, let's just see what it would look like. What can it even at first theoretically look like, and then how can it be actualized? Like, there's 100%, like, let's say the clouds were filled with enlightened extraterrestrials watching humanity, alright? And imagine suddenly, the enlightened extraterrestrials, they were all betting on what the human being would do, and so it was hilarious, because it's as if that enlightened extraterrestrials could see so many different ways the human species could conduct itself. We have to pretty much consider that there is an inner life, outer life. The outer life has to try to remain as natural and biological as possible, right? The inner life has to, in some sense, become limitless by its boundary of own identification. That means it's as if you start as a self in a world, and then you become a world in a self. That's pretty much when you realize the nature of your mind. Now, when you realize the self and world are both geometry being witnessed, and when you realize that inner witness is unknown, you reach a point where all that you can do is just be content with the simplicity. But in actuality, life is also, in some sense, trusting the rhythms that in some sense open the worlds. I don't know how to say it. It's as if some moments in life, it's not even, it's like that there is no need for analysis, just faith is its own path. When we have become victorious in the universe of the past, when we have become victorious in the universe of the present, only the future remains. The future is not only unavoidable, but it is the greatest journey of a species in the world. There is not just honor in that, there is the species is rebelling against non-existence. It's like consciousness is like the counterattack of an organism that says, universe, you have brought me here and now you will take me away. It's as if the species continues. It's like the lion suddenly not first leaps as far as it can, then roars as loud as it can. Do you see? That's how advanced civilizations occur. They wake up. Do you know? It's like a giant waking up. Do you know? That's how an advanced civilization happens. And right now, it's as if, imagine like back in the day, they would say all of civilization was made on a turtle's back. Imagine somebody touching the ground and being like, yo man, this turtle shell is like lifeless. You know, and imagine somebody touching the turtle's neck and being like, okay, no, there's a heartbeat to the ground. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. This one says